He posted a TikTok captioned, "Dating down builds character," with me in the background. His friends were commenting laughing emojis and, "Bro, you're so real for this." I didn't say a word. I just packed my things and left that night. 2 weeks later, his best friend sent me a screenshot. He had deleted every post and was asking if anyone had a way to reach me. My name is Clara Whitmore. I was 29 when I learned that humiliation does not always arrive as a scream across a dinner table. Sometimes it arrives softly through a glowing phone screen, with a trending sound, a ring light, and a caption written by someone who still kisses your forehead before bed. Mason and I met at a music festival 3 summers earlier. I was doing freelance sound work for one of the smaller stages. He was taking photos and filming short clips for a lifestyle page that had just started gaining traction. He had that easy kind of charm that made strangers feel like they already knew him. He complimented the way I handled the chaos backstage, joked that I looked too calm for someone surrounded by blown speakers and drunk guitarists, and somehow stayed beside me through an entire set change. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. By the end of the month, I was seeing him every weekend. And by the end of 6 months, I had moved into his apartment. It made practical sense at the time. Mason had a rent-controlled place in a good part of the city, close to both of our jobs. I paid my share every month. Groceries, utilities, half the rent, half the little things people never count until they are angry. But the lease stayed in his name because it had been his apartment first. Back then, that did not bother me. I trusted him. I thought we were building something real. Mason worked as a content creator for a fashion subscription service. He styled shoots, tested products, posted lifestyle videos, and built a personal brand around being ambitious, funny, and authentically honest. That was his phrase, not mine. He said people followed him because he made them feel like he was letting them in. I was a sound engineer at an indie recording studio. I loved my work, even when the hours were long and the pay was not glamorous. I knew how to clean up a vocal track until it sounded like a confession. I knew how to make silence feel intentional. I knew how to sit with an artist while they broke open emotionally in front of a microphone. But I did not have followers. I did not have brand deals. I did not know which coffee shops photographed well in morning light. At first, Mason said he liked that about me. "You're real," he would say, resting his chin on my shoulder while I edited late at night. "You don't perform for anyone." I used to think that was love. Later, I realized it was a warning. Things shifted slowly. Not enough to accuse him of anything, just enough to make me feel like I was always one step behind a conversation everyone else understood. At parties, when people asked what I did, Mason would answer before I could. "She works in music," he would say quickly. "Super creative, very behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. That phrase started following me around. When I came to one of his brand events in black jeans and a clean button-down, he smiled tightly and whispered, "You look cute. Maybe next time something a little more polished?" When his friends talked about investments, launches, collaborations, and scaling income, Mason would squeeze my hand under the table like he was comforting me, even though I had not said anything. Once, after a dinner with 2 influencers and a photographer, he said, "You could probably make more if you went commercial. Ads, corporate audio, something with actual money." I laughed because I thought he was worrying about our future. "I like what I do," I said. "I know," he replied. "I just don't want you to limit yourself." It sounded supportive. That was the problem. Mason was very good at making judgment sound like concern. Still, I loved him. I loved the version of him who brought me tea during late mixes, who sent me voice notes when he traveled for shoots, who danced barefoot in the kitchen when I played old soul records on Sunday mornings. I loved him enough to ignore the small humiliations, until the algorithm put one in my hand. It was a random Wednesday. I was on lunch break at the studio, sitting on the back steps with a half-eaten sandwich, scrolling through TikTok because my ears needed a rest from the same chorus I had been editing for 3 hours. I did not follow Mason's account closely. His content was mostly fashion, lifestyle jokes, and little commentary videos about modern dating, ambition, and knowing your worth. He never pushed me to interact with it. "It's not really your demographic," he would say with a grin. That day, his video appeared on my For You page anyway. At first, I smiled. It was our living room, the soft beige couch, the narrow bookshelf, the framed concert poster I had bought at a flea market. Mason stood in the foreground, wearing a cream sweater I had helped him choose, lip-syncing to a trending audio about settling for less before leveling up. Then I saw myself in the background. I was sitting at my small desk by the window, headphones on, completely unaware. My hair was twisted up with a pencil, one knee tucked under me. I was nodding along to a track I must have been mixing that afternoon. For 1 second, the image felt intimate, domestic, almost sweet. Then I read the caption, "Dating down builds character." Under it, Mason had added, #trust the process. My body went cold before my mind caught up. I stared at the screen, waiting for my brain to explain it another way. Maybe it was satire. Maybe the caption was aimed at someone else. Maybe there was context I was missing. Then I opened the comments. "Bro, you're so real for this." The way she has no idea. "Invest in potential, but don't wait forever." Character development boyfriend era. Then I saw Mason's replies. Had to start somewhere. "The apartment is mine anyway." "She's sweet, but this isn't the final stop." I read that last one 3 times. This isn't the final stop. Not because I did not understand it, because I did. The room around me seemed to narrow until all that existed was the phone in my hand and the version of myself Mason had offered to strangers. I was not a woman he loved in that video. I was background evidence. A prop. The before picture in a story he was already telling about his future. I watched it again. There I was, in the background of my own relationship, being used as a joke about how temporary I was. Mason had filmed me while I was working. In our home. In the same room where I had folded his laundry, paid half his bills, held him through brand rejections, celebrated every small win like it belonged to both of us. And he had turned me into content. Something edited, captioned, posted, and served to strangers for engagement. The comments kept coming. People I had never met picked apart my appearance, my job, my energy, my income, my supposed lack of ambition. Some of Mason's friends were there too, laughing like they had been waiting for permission. I closed the app. The sandwich sat untouched in my lap. For a long moment, all I could hear was the muffled bass from inside the studio, pulsing through the wall like someone else's heartbeat. Then every small moment I had excused started lining up in my memory. The way Mason never tagged me. The way he cropped me out of event photos. The way he called me private when what he meant was not impressive enough. The way he smiled when people assumed I was just helping him carry equipment. I was not his girlfriend. I was his contrast. His humble chapter. His proof that he had dated down before he moved up. And the worst part was not that strangers believed it. The worst part was that Mason had given them the script. I sat there until my phone screen went dark. For a few seconds, I could still see the ghost of his caption burned behind my eyes. Dating down builds character. It was strange how 5 words could rearrange 3 years of memories. Before that moment, I had always believed love was built in private, in quiet kitchens, in grocery aisles, in tired laughter at midnight. In the small, unglamorous ways 2 people choose each other when nobody is watching. But Mason had been watching. More than that, he had been framing. He had looked at our living room, at me working with headphones on, at the ordinary softness of our life together, and seen material. I opened TikTok again because I wanted there to be some explanation that made this less cruel. The video had more comments now. "Tell me she at least pays rent." Mason replied, "She contributes." Just that. Not "she pays half." Not "don't talk about my girlfriend like that." Just one small word that made me sound like a charity project. Another comment said, "Men like you always upgrade eventually." Mason had liked it. I stared at the tiny red heart beside his name until my throat tightened. That was when something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough for me to understand that the person I loved had been letting the world laugh at me while I was sitting right beside him. I did not cry. Not then. I think my body knew crying would make it real, and I still had work to finish. So I locked my phone, stood up, threw my sandwich away, and went back inside. The artist we were recording that afternoon was a young woman named Lila, who had written a breakup song so raw the room seemed to quiet itself every time she stepped to the microphone. She kept apologizing after each take, embarrassed by how emotional she sounded. "Don't apologize," I told her from behind the console. "That's the part people will believe." She gave a small laugh and wiped under one eye. I almost laughed too, because apparently I was suddenly qualified to engineer heartbreak. For the next several hours, I focused on her voice, breath, timing, texture, the little crack on the word stay, the silence before the last chorus. I poured everything I could not say into making that song hurt beautifully. By the time the session ended, Hector, the studio owner, leaned into the control room and said, "That mix is going to ruin somebody's evening." Normally, that would have made me proud. That day, it just felt accurate. I drove home after sunset. Home. The word felt wrong now. The apartment still looked the same when I opened the door. warm light, Mason's shoes by the entry, a half-empty glass of sparkling water on the counter, the faint scent of his expensive candle burning in the living room because he said warm lighting made his evening content perform better. He was filming when I walked in. Of course he was. His ring light stood beside the couch, glowing like a small artificial moon. Mason was angled toward his phone, smiling with that effortless brightness his followers loved. Okay, but here's the thing, he was saying. You can love someone and still know they're not aligned with your future self. I stopped in the hallway. My keys were still in my hand. He had not noticed me yet. You don't have to villainize them, he continued. Sometimes people are good people, just not your level long term. My level, long term. Something colder than anger settled in my chest. Then Mason saw me in the phone screen and paused. Oh, hey. His smile softened instantly, as if he could switch from public wisdom to private boyfriend with one blink. I'm almost done. Thought we could order from that Thai place tonight. The Thai place. Our usual order. Green curry for him. Pad see ew for me. Mango sticky rice if one of us had a bad day. I looked at him and wondered how many sweet routines had been used as camouflage for contempt. I did not answer. I walked past him toward the bedroom. Clara, he called lightly. Everything okay? I kept walking. Behind me, I heard him pause the recording. Not because he was worried, I realized, because my silence was ruining the take. In the bedroom, I closed the door halfway and pulled my suitcase from the closet. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I packed only what was mine. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, hard drives, important documents, notebooks filled with session notes, and the silver headphones my father had given me after I got my first studio job. I left the framed photos. I left the throw blanket we bought together. I left the coffee mugs from weekend trips. I even left the sweater Mason had given me last winter, the one he said made me look soft and serious at the same time. I wanted no souvenirs from a relationship where I had been privately useful and publicly embarrassing. Halfway through packing, I opened the top drawer of the dresser and found a stack of small cards I had saved from him. Little notes. Proud of you today. You make ordinary days feel less ordinary. Don't forget, you're magic with sound. For a moment, those cards hurt more than the TikTok, because maybe he had meant them once, or maybe Mason was simply good at writing captions in every format. I put the cards back. When I came out with the suitcase, Mason was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His face was tense now, not guilty yet, just irritated. Going somewhere? He asked. Yes. That got his full attention. His eyes dropped to the suitcase. What is happening? I held up my phone and turned the screen toward him. The video was open. For the first time that night, Mason said nothing. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then calculation. Not regret. Calculation. Clara, he said carefully, that was just content. The sentence was so small compared to the damage it had done. Just content, I repeated. He stood, palms open like he was calming an unreasonable client. Babe, come on. You know how social media works. People exaggerate. It's a bit. You filmed me without telling me. It was in the apartment. You were just in the background. You captioned it like I was beneath you. He looked away, only for a second. But I saw it. Mason. He exhaled sharply. It's a persona. My audience likes messy honesty. They like jokes about dating, ambition, leveling up. It doesn't mean I actually think. You replied to comments. His jaw tightened. I scrolled and read one aloud. She's sweet, but this isn't the final stop. The room went quiet. The candle flickered on the coffee table between us. Mason rubbed the back of his neck. That sounded worse than I meant it. No, I said. It sounded exactly like you typed it. He stepped closer. You're taking this too literally. I'm taking it as publicly written evidence. His eyes flashed then. The charm thinned. So what? You're going to throw away 3 years over a stupid TikTok? No, I said. I'm walking away from the version of me you tried to sell online. He laughed once, humorless. This is dramatic. That word landed exactly where he intended it to. For years, women are trained to fear being called dramatic more than being disrespected. We shrink our reactions so someone else can stay comfortable with what they did. But that night, I was too tired to shrink. You told strangers I was not your final stop, I said. So I'm leaving before you get there. His expression cracked. Just slightly. Wait, he said, reaching for my suitcase handle. No, we're not doing this. We need to talk. I pulled it back. We are talking. No, you're punishing me. I'm believing you. That stopped him. For the first time, Mason looked scared. Because I was not crying. I was not begging. I was not asking him to explain the caption until he found a softer meaning. I was simply accepting the meaning he had already given it. He shook his head. You know I love you. I know you loved having me here. That's not fair. Fair? I almost smiled. You let your friends laugh at me while I was sitting 10 feet away from you in a video. They don't know you like I do. You made sure of that. His mouth opened, then closed. There it was. The truth neither of us had said. Mason had kept me separate from the polished parts of his life because I did not match the story he wanted to tell about himself. I was good enough to split rent with. Good enough to comfort him after bad brand calls. Good enough to clap when his follower count rose. But not good enough to be defended in front of the audience he wanted to impress. He looked toward the phone on the couch, and I saw the panic sharpen. Look, he said quickly, I'll delete it, right now. I'll make a follow-up. I'll say people misunderstood. People understood perfectly. I'll tell them I was joking. You were joking, that's the problem. His voice rose. What do you want me to do, Clara? I looked around the apartment one last time. The couch where I had slept beside him during a fever. The kitchen where we danced barefoot. The desk where I had been filmed like background furniture. Then I looked back at him. Nothing, I said. That's the part you don't understand. I don't want you to fix the post. I don't want you to manage the damage. I don't want a better caption. His face softened suddenly, trying a different route. Baby, please. I shook my head. I want a life where the person sleeping next to me doesn't need an audience to tell him whether I'm worth respecting. Mason's eyes went wet, but even then, some bitter part of me wondered if he was feeling pain or losing control of the narrative. He stepped aside when I moved toward the door. Then, as my hand touched the knob, he said the thing that confirmed everything. This is my apartment too, Clara. You can't just leave like this. I turned back. Exactly, I said. It's your apartment. You made that very clear in the comments. His face drained. I didn't mean... You did. The hallway outside was colder than I expected. Mason followed me to the doorway. No longer polished, no longer glowing under the ring light. Just a man standing barefoot in the wreckage of his own caption. Where are you going? He asked. To someone who won't turn my pain into engagement. Then I walked away. Behind me, he called my name once. Then again. Then louder. I did not turn around. Because if I had, I might have remembered the version of him who brought me tea. The version who danced in the kitchen. The version who wrote little cards and made me believe I was seen. But that version had not defended me. That version had held the camera. I expected to cry in the car. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, just emptied out. Like my body had decided emotion could wait until survival was handled first. I drove straight to my friend Naomi's apartment. She opened the door, wearing oversized sleep shorts and one sock, took one look at my suitcase and said, "Who do I need to ruin?" That almost made me laugh. Almost. Can I stay here a few days? She stepped aside immediately. You even asking is offensive. I walked in, set my suitcase down, and finally exhaled. Naomi handed me a glass of water and waited. I showed her the TikTok. She watched it once, then again, then turned the phone over face down on the table like it had personally insulted her. Oh, absolutely not. That was all she said at first. And somehow, that helped more than any attempt to soften it would have. She did not ask if maybe it was a misunderstanding. She did not say Mason probably did not mean it. She did not suggest communication. She saw exactly what it was. Humiliation. I feel stupid, I admitted. Naomi's expression hardened instantly. No. I lived with him for 3 years. No. How did I miss this? Clara. Her tone was sharp enough to stop me. Cruel people do not introduce themselves as cruel. If they did, nobody would stay long enough to get hurt. That sentence stayed with me, because it was true. Mason had not started with contempt. He had started with charm, attention, and affection so consistent it felt safe. That was what made betrayal so disorienting. Not that someone bad hurt you, but that someone loving had quietly taught himself how to disrespect you without feeling guilty. That night, my phone exploded. Texts from Mason came in waves. Mason, it was a joke. 2 minutes later, you are massively overreacting. Then, can you please just talk to me? Then, this is insane. Then, I deleted it. Then, Clara, please. Then, please come home. Naomi looked over my shoulder. He's speedrunning every stage of manipulation. I almost smiled. Almost. An hour later, the tone changed. Mason, I never meant to hurt you. Then, people online don't understand context. Then, I panicked when you left. Then, I love you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one message. I deserve better than being someone's stepping stone or social media punchline. Please don't contact me again. Then I blocked his number. My hand trembled afterward. Not from doubt, from adrenaline. Because blocking someone after years together feels less like pressing a button and more like amputating a future you thought was already built. Naomi made tea. I sat cross-legged on her couch in borrowed pajamas and stared at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. That was when the tears came. The ugly kind. The kind where grief and humiliation blur together until you cannot tell whether you are mourning the relationship or your own judgment. Did he ever love me? I asked into the dark. Naomi answered without hesitation. Probably. That surprised me. She rolled onto her side and looked at me. But loving someone and respecting them are not always the same thing. That hurt worse because it felt true. The next morning, I went to work. Not because I was okay. Because sitting still felt dangerous. Hector glanced at me when I walked in. You look like you either committed a felony or got dumped. Neither. He studied me for another second. Want the easy session or the impossible one? Impossible. He nodded, like that told him everything he needed to know. The artist that day was maddeningly talented and catastrophically inconsistent. Perfect pitch. Terrible timing. Zero patience. Exactly the kind of project that required total focus, which was probably why Hector assigned it. Around lunch, he handed me coffee without comment. No questions. No awkward sympathy. Just caffeine and work. I appreciated him for that. At some point that afternoon, I got a message from Jasmine, Mason's former roommate. We had always gotten along, mostly because Mason found underground hip-hop aggressively exhausting, and Jasmine and I had bonded over exactly that kind of music. Her message was short. Jasmine, hey, just checking if you're okay. I stared at it. Then another came. What he did was messed up. A third. A bunch of us told him so. That surprised me. I had assumed his friends would circle around him. Defend the content. Minimize it. Call me sensitive. Instead, Jasmine sent. Some people laughed at first because they thought it was one of his usual exaggerated dating jokes. Then, but once they realized you hadn't agreed to it, that you didn't even know? Different story. I leaned back in my chair. The detail that hurt most was how believable it had apparently been. Nobody saw the caption and thought, Mason would never think that about Clara. Because maybe he had already laid that groundwork. I replied simply, thanks, I'm okay, just need space. Jasmine respected that. No gossip. No digging. No screenshots. Just understood. Take care of yourself. That night, Naomi ordered takeout and forced me to eat actual vegetables. I finally slept. The next day, I returned to the apartment with Naomi and a mutual friend present, while Mason was supposed to be out. I only intended to grab essentials. More clothes. A few personal things. Some work gear. But the second I stepped inside, something felt off. The apartment was spotless. Too spotless. The kind of clean people do after panic. The candle scent had been replaced. The throw pillows were perfectly arranged. And on the coffee table sat a handwritten note. Clara, please let me explain. I did not touch it. Naomi picked it up, read the first line, snorted, and put it back down. Predictable. I packed silently. Each drawer felt like excavation. Here was the sweater I wore on our trip to Portland. Here was the charger he always stole. Here was the receipt from the ramen place where he once told me I was the easiest person to be around. Memory is cruel like that. It turns ordinary objects into emotional landmines. Then the front door opened. Mason froze. I froze. Naomi muttered, "Oh, fantastic." Mason looked terrible. Not in a dramatic movie star way. Actually terrible. Poor sleep. Unshaven. Same shirt from yesterday. Wrinkled. For one ugly second, my heart reacted before my pride did. Because familiarity can mimic love. "Clara." His voice cracked. Naomi stepped slightly closer to me. Mason looked at her, then back at me. "I just wanted to talk. I'm here for my things." "That's it?" His voice lifted. 3 years and that's it? I kept folding clothes. "Mason." "No." He stepped forward. "No, you do not get to walk out like I'm some villain." Naomi laughed once. Bold strategy. Mason ignored her. "You know me." I looked at him finally. "That's exactly the problem." He flinched. "Good. I made a stupid post. You publicly humiliated me. It wasn't supposed to be that serious." "Then why did you answer comments?" Silence. Then, "I got carried away." That phrase hit me like ice water, because it was probably true. This was not some secret hatred finally revealed. This was worse. A man so comfortable with disrespect that cruelty came naturally when attention rewarded it. I deleted it. After I left, I panicked. "Yes." He looked desperate. "I love you." Naomi made a visible face. I ignored her. "Do you?" He stared. Because now he had to think about it, and the hesitation told me everything. Love without instinctive respect is vanity, possession, convenience, routine, but not safety. I messed up. Yes. I can fix this. No. You're not even trying. That almost made me angry enough to yell. Instead, I zipped the suitcase. Trying, I repeated quietly. You made me content. That's not fair. There it is. What? That word again. He looked confused. Fair. I picked up my bag. You keep acting like the problem is my reaction. His face hardened. So that's it? Yes. You're really throwing us away. No, I said, you did. He followed us into the hallway. Clara! I stopped. He looked almost hopeful. Then I said, if I had done that to you, posted you, mocked your career, laughed with my friends, would you still be asking me to stay? His silence answered. Naomi pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. Mason said my name one last time, but now it sounded less like love. More like disbelief that access had consequences. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. And for the first time since seeing that video, I believed I was actually gone. 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. The breakup song I had engineered started moving. At first, it was small, a clipped snippet on Instagram, then reposts from local musicians, then comments from producers asking who mixed it, then more shares. Not viral in the way Mason understood virality. No trending audio, no humiliating captions, no strangers farming outrage for engagement. Just people in the music world hearing something honest and responding to it, which somehow made it feel more real. I was in the control room cleaning up vocal layers when Hector appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame with that deliberately neutral expression he used when pretending not to deliver life-changing information. You busy? Always. Good. He stepped inside and handed me his tablet. An email thread was open. I skimmed the sender name once, then again, then a third time. Stonebridge Records. I looked up. Hector. They liked the Lila track. Liked? He folded his arms. They want you. For a moment, I thought he meant feedback, consulting, maybe a remote mix. Then he kept talking. 6-month contract. Staff engineering support for new artist development. I blinked. Seattle. That one word landed harder than the rest. Seattle. Different city. Different life. Different air. My throat tightened. This is real? Very. I looked down again. Compensation. Housing support. Project details. Studio expectations. Legitimate. Professional. The kind of opportunity people quietly chase for years. Hector watched me absorb it. I'd hate losing you, he admitted, but if I tried to talk you out of this, I'd deserve to be professionally disbarred. I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in days. Then immediately felt guilty for feeling anything close to happiness while my personal life was still in pieces. Apparently Hector saw that. Bad timing doesn't make good things fake. I looked at him. You always know exactly when to say something annoyingly wise. It's a management skill. I spent the rest of that day pretending to work while my brain ricocheted between futures. Seattle. A contract. A fresh start. A relationship that had just imploded. A city full of memories I had not finished grieving. That night, Naomi read the offer 3 times like it might disappear. This is insane. Good insane? Clara. She grabbed both my shoulders. This is career-defining insane. I sank onto her couch. I can't tell if the universe is comforting me or mocking me. Why? Because this happened right after Mason. Naomi sat beside me. Those things are unrelated. I know. Do you? I stared at the contract again. She softened. This didn't happen because you were humiliated. It happened because you're good. That mattered, because part of me had already started building a false story. Pain in, reward out. As if life were balanced that neatly. But she was right. This was not karma. It was timing. And preparation. And years of work Mason had clearly never considered impressive enough. The next morning I received another message. Jasmine. This time with screenshots. Apparently the TikTok fallout had evolved. At first, Mason's followers defended him. Classic internet pile-on logic. She's too sensitive. It's just a joke. People need thicker skin. But then the tone changed. Someone had stitched the video. A larger creator with the substantial audience. The caption. Humiliating your partner for engagement is not dark humor. It's cruelty. That changed the current fast. Comments flooded Mason's page differently now. Questions about consent. Questions about respect. Questions about whether he regularly used real people for content without permission. Brand accounts that usually interacted with his posts went silent. Then came the apology-adjacent content. Deleted quickly, according to Jasmine. Apparently, Mason had posted a vague story about learning hard lessons about authenticity and boundaries. The internet hated that. Wow, a non-apology speedrun. Awesome. Say what you actually did, not you discovering consequences. I should not have cared. But I did. Not because I wanted revenge. Because public humiliation creates a sick instinct to see balance restored. I hated that instinct, but I understood it. Jasmine sent one final message. Honestly, he looks wrecked. I stared at that longer than I should have. Not because I wanted him hurting. Because some stupid tender part of me still cared whether he was okay. Healing is embarrassing like that. Meanwhile, work accelerated. Stonebridge wanted a response by the end of the week. Industry friends encouraged me to take it. One producer I respected laughed when I hesitated. Are you out of your mind? Possibly. Then become sane immediately and sign. But the decision was not just career. It was emotional geography. Leaving meant severing more than a relationship. It meant abandoning familiar streets, favorite coffee shops, routine, and the dangerous illusion that if Mason somehow became the person I thought he was, reconciliation would still be waiting in the same city. Not that I wanted that, but heartbreak doesn't instantly delete possibility. It just teaches you to distrust it. By Friday, I returned to the apartment one final time. This time Mason was deliberately gone. A mutual friend supervised to avoid drama. I packed what remained: studio gear, books, clothes, my records, a ceramic bowl my mother made, a framed photo of Naomi and me from years ago. I left everything remotely arguable. No shared furniture, no gifts, no symbolic scavenging. Clean exit. Halfway through, the mutual friend shifted awkwardly. There's something you should probably know. I kept packing. Okay, Mason's losing deals. I looked up. Meaning? He had 2 sponsorship conversations pause. I said nothing. The friend continued. Apparently, some people started reviewing older posts. That made sense. Patterns always look obvious in hindsight. Some weren't great. I zipped another bag. That's unfortunate. The friend watched me carefully. You're not happy about it? I thought about that honestly. No. Really? His consequences are his. And I meant it. Revenge sounds satisfying in imagination. Reality is messier. I did not need Mason destroyed. I needed distance. As I packed the last box, I found something shoved behind a drawer. One of those tiny folded notes Mason used to leave. I opened it before I could stop myself. Proud of you, always. That one sentence nearly broke me. Because heartbreak is rarely clean. Cruel people are not cruel every minute. That is what makes leaving hard. If they were awful all the time, nobody would stay. I put the note back and walked away. That night, I accepted Stonebridge. Digitally signed. Sent. Done. The moment the confirmation email arrived, Naomi screamed loud enough to concern her upstairs neighbors. We celebrated with cheap wine and takeout noodles eaten from cartons. For the first time since everything happened, the future looked bigger than the betrayal. But Mason was not finished. 2 weeks after I left, Jasmine sent me another screenshot. Private Instagram story. Black background. White text. Does anyone have a current way to contact Clara? It's important. I stared at it. Jasmine followed immediately. He found out about Seattle. Then, now he keeps telling people he always believed in your talent. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the predictability was almost insulting. The man who publicly implied I was temporary was suddenly narrating himself as my quiet supporter. Jasmine, thought you should know. Me. Thank you. Then another message. For what it's worth, I think he regrets it. That complicated things. Because I believed her. Regret is easy to imagine when consequences arrive. But maybe some of it was real. Maybe Mason had looked around his suddenly quieter apartment and realized what he had actually traded for attention. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he even loved me in the incomplete, selfish way he knew how. None of that changed the truth. Then, 3 days before my move, he found a way through. An email landed in my professional inbox. Not my personal account. Not my phone. The email listed on the studio website, which meant Mason had gone looking. The subject line was simple. Please read. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Clara, I know I probably don't deserve a response, but please hear me out. I messed up badly. I've replayed everything 100 times, and I know what I did was cruel. I never meant to hurt you the way I did. The video was stupid content, not how I really felt. I kept reading. I found out about Seattle. I'm proud of you. I always knew you were talented. I know you probably don't believe that right now, but it's true. Please let me explain in person. Please let me make this right. I miss you. I love you. I leaned back in my chair, then laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because something about the timing was so offensively neat. The humiliation had happened when he believed I was stagnant. The apology arrived when I had become impressive. That is a brutal thing to think about someone you once loved. But once trust fractures, timing becomes its own kind of evidence. Naomi read the email over my shoulder, then made a face. Oh, absolutely not. You're so measured. Thank you. I reread the line. I always knew you were talented. That sentence bothered me more than the apology. Because if it were true, why had he hidden me? Why had he treated my career like an adorable side quest? Why had strangers felt so comfortable mocking my ambition? I did not answer immediately, partly because I needed clarity, partly because some small wounded part of me wanted him to sit in uncertainty. The next day, Jasmine called, not texted, called. That alone told me something. Hey, she said carefully. Hey, you okay? Depends what this call is about. She sighed. Fair. Then, he's not doing well. I closed my eyes. There it was. The sentence heartbreak always knows how to react to, no matter how justified the separation, no matter how clear the betrayal. The moment you hear they are hurting, some ancient emotional reflex reaches for compassion. I hated that reflex. He should probably discuss that with a therapist. Jasmine actually laughed. Honestly, fair. Then her tone softened. Look, I'm not calling to pressure you. Okay. I just think you deserve context. I stayed quiet. Mason didn't expect this to become what it became. No kidding. I mean, really didn't. That changes nothing. I know. Pause. Then, but I also don't think he expected you to leave. That landed differently. Because it felt true. Not as a defense. As a diagnosis. Mason had expected hurt feelings. Maybe an argument. Maybe tears. Maybe a dramatic reconciliation arc he could manage. He had not expected absence. He keeps saying he thought you'd yell. I almost smiled. Interesting. He said you being calm scared him. That made sense. Men like Mason understood emotion as negotiable terrain. Crying could be soothed. Anger could be reframed. Debates could be redirected. But detachment? Detachment offers no handles. Jasmine continued. For what it's worth, I do think he regrets it. Because of the backlash? Silence. Then, at first, maybe partly. Honest answer? You deserve one. I appreciated that. But now? She exhaled. Now I think he actually understands what he lost. That sentence sat strangely inside me. Because maybe it was true. And maybe it didn't matter. Those are not contradictory things. Thanks for telling me. Are you going to respond? Yes. Really? Yes. Pause. But not the way he wants. That evening, I drafted my reply. Deleted it. Drafted another. Deleted that too. Not because I wanted reconciliation. Because ending something important deserves precision. Finally, I wrote, Mason, what happened between us was not a misunderstanding. It was not a joke that landed badly. It was a public expression of private disrespect. Your video didn't create a false version of me. It revealed a version of how you saw me that I had been trying not to notice. This opportunity in Seattle does not validate my worth any more than your TikTok diminished it. I was the same person before both things happened. That matters to me. I wish you well, but I am not interested in reconnecting. Please do not contact me again. Simple, clear, final. I hit send, then immediately felt sick. Not regret, grief, because closure rarely feels triumphant. Mostly, it feels like attending the funeral of a future you once planned. The next morning, Mason emailed back. One line. Can we at least talk once, face to face? I deleted it. No response. 2 hours later. Please. Deleted. Then, you owe me that after 3 years. That one made me go cold. There it was. The entitlement beneath the apology. The idea that time invested guaranteed access. I blocked the email. Naomi read that last message and said, there he is. Exactly. Not the devastated lover. The man who still believed emotional access could be demanded. My final week in the city became logistics. Packing, paperwork, apartment arrangements in Seattle, equipment shipping, goodbye dinners, professional transitions. Practical tasks leave less room for romantic revisionism. But then came the unexpected complication. 2 nights before my flight, I ran into Mason. Not planned. Not cinematic. Just terrible luck. I was at a small grocery store near Naomi's building, holding avocados and frozen dumplings, when I heard my name, quietly. Clara. I turned. Mason looked thinner, tired. No curated charm, no perfect outfit, just a man in an old hoodie staring at me like he had not prepared for the reality of my existence. For one terrible second, my chest hurt with recognition. Not longing. Recognition. There is a difference. Hi, he said. I said nothing. I didn't know you were here. Clearly. He nodded. Fair. I read your email. I assume so. I deserve that. I waited. He swallowed. I just wanted to say it in person. No. His face tightened. Clara. No. People nearby moved around us, oblivious. Someone compared cereal prices 3 feet away while my former relationship tried to resurrect itself beside freezer doors. I was cruel, he said. Yes. I was stupid. Yes. I got addicted to engagement. I said nothing. Everything became content. That at least sounded honest. He stepped closer. Not threatening, just desperate. I compartmentalized. Interesting word. Professional. Neat. Like disrespect had been a workflow issue. You were my real life, he said. The online version of me got twisted. I looked at him. Do you hear yourself? His face crumpled. I know. No, I said, I don't think you do. Clara! You did not accidentally disrespect me. You made choices. I know. You replied to comments. I know. You called me temporary. I know. His voice cracked. I hate myself for it. That landed harder than expected. Because shame can sound sincere. But shame is not repair. Then learn from it. He stared at me. You really mean this? Yes. His next question came out almost like a child's. Was there anything I could have said? That one hurt. Because once upon a time, maybe yes. Before the comments. Before the pattern became undeniable. Before he made me explain why dignity mattered. But now? No. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. I did love you. I believed him. That was the complicated part. I know, I said. His expression shifted in surprise. Then pain. Then why? Maybe you loved me, I said quietly. But you respected your audience more than you respected me. That was the sentence. The true ending. He looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he nodded once. Tiny. Broken. Then stepped back. I walked away. Did not turn around. And just when I thought his story had finally left mine, Jasmine sent one more screenshot. By then, Seattle had started to feel like mine. Not fully, but enough. Enough that I had favorite coffee shops. Enough that the barista near the studio knew my order. Enough that rainy mornings no longer felt lonely, just atmospheric. Stonebridge had extended my contract after the first 6 months, then made it permanent. The work was demanding in the best possible way. Messy artists, impossible deadlines, brilliant late-night sessions where exhaustion somehow turned into creative clarity. The kind of work that leaves you drained and deeply satisfied at the same time. I moved from the temporary furnished unit into a small apartment with big windows and terrible kitchen lighting. I made friends. Real ones. People who knew me as Clara, not as someone's partner, not as social contrast, not as a supporting prop in someone else's brand narrative. I met people slowly, carefully, without rushing my heart to prove it had healed. I discovered that healing is rarely cinematic. It is not a dramatic transformation montage or a sudden emotional enlightenment. It is repetition. Better choices made quietly until they become instinct. Some nights I still thought about Mason, less often over time, but enough. Not because I wanted him back. Because grief doesn't vanish just because the decision was correct. You can leave for the right reasons and still mourn what you hoped someone would become. One afternoon, I was helping prep a vocal chain when Jasmine texted. First message in months. You free? I replied. Depends. Is someone dead? She responded. No, just internet irony. Then came the screenshot. Mason's account. I stared, then laughed. Actually laughed. His content had changed completely. No polished superiority. No smug relationship commentary. No leveling up nonsense. Now it was authenticity, emotional accountability, social media toxicity, personal growth. Thumbnail literally read, Why internet validation almost cost me everything. I nearly choked. Jasmine called immediately. You saw it? Yes. Wild, right? That is one word. Apparently Mason had leaned fully into redemption content, apology videos, reflective monologues, learning moments, commentary about digital culture, performance identity, emotional disconnection. And somehow his audience grew. People love a redemption arc, Jasmine said dryly. Apparently, he never named you. Good. But people who knew, knew. That felt strange, becoming a silent chapter in someone else's reinvention. Still, I asked the question anyway. Is it real? Jasmine paused. Interesting. Then, I think partly. Meaning, I think he genuinely changed in some ways. I absorbed that. Okay. But I also think Mason will always understand growth through audience reaction first. That felt painfully accurate. Some people change because conscience hits. Others change because consequences teach what conscience never did. Both can create behavioral improvement. They are not identical. A month later, something stranger happened. A local music blog interviewed me after a track I engineered started getting regional radio play. Small article. Nothing massive. Still exciting. The writer asked the usual questions: career path, creative process, defining professional moments. Then, was there a turning point? I knew exactly what she meant professionally, but my mind went somewhere else. To the TikTok, to that caption, to the back steps behind the studio, to Naomi's couch, to grocery store fluorescent lighting, to the precise moment I understood humiliation only has the power you grant it. I chose my words carefully. There was a point where I had to decide whether I wanted to be chosen by people who measured me poorly or choose myself before they got another chance. The interviewer blinked, then smiled. That's a quote. Apparently it was. The article ran, "Nothing dramatic happened." But later that night, I thought about how different my answer would have been a year earlier. Back then, I might have talked about opportunity, timing, luck. Now I understood the real pivot had not been Seattle. It had been walking away. Seattle was geography. Walking away was identity. Because this story was never actually about career success. That part was fortunate, but it was not the point. If Stonebridge had never called, the right decision would still have been leaving. A year after everything happened, I received one final message. Not from Mason directly, through Jasmine. A screenshot, a private note he had asked her to pass along only if she felt it was appropriate. I hesitated before reading, then opened it. It was short. No performance, no clever phrasing, no audience language. Just, I'm sorry for the actual thing I did. Not the backlash, not losing followers, not the consequences. I'm sorry I made someone who loved me feel small. I understand if that changes nothing. I just wanted to say it correctly. I read it twice, then handed the phone back. Well? Jasmine asked. I thought about it honestly. That sounds real. Yeah. Too late. Also, yeah. And that was it. No emotional reunion. No secret reconciliation. No dramatic final coffee. Just acknowledgement. Distance. A cleaner ending than I expected, but not an open door. I do not hate Mason. That surprises some people, but hatred is exhausting. And honestly, holding on to anger would mean letting that chapter keep renting space in my life. What I feel now is something quieter. Sadness for what was lost. Gratitude for clarity. Respect for the version of myself who chose dignity while still heartbroken. Sometimes people ask if I regret not publicly exposing him, posting screenshots, telling my side, letting the internet drag him. Because revenge would have kept me emotionally tied to someone I needed freedom from. The most powerful thing I ever did was not humiliating him back. It was refusing to audition for a role in his story anymore. I left. I built something better. And eventually, the memory stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like evidence. Evidence that self-respect is often quiet. Evidence that leaving can be the whole statement. Evidence that the right ending is not always the loudest one. If there is any irony in all this, it is that Mason's TikTok was supposed to frame me as temporary. Disposable. A stepping stone. Instead, it became the exact moment I stopped accepting less than respect. He thought he was telling the internet who I was. He accidentally reminded me.